The moon of Kepler 442c hung like a dead gray rock in the purple sky, spinning slowly around its gas giant parent. On its dark side, hidden from all scanning equipment and orbital sensors, a massive underground facility stretched deep into the lunar core. The base had no official name in any galactic records, but those who worked there called it simply the Vault. Commander Zethkara walked the metal corridors with heavy steps, his 6 arms clasped behind his back in the traditional Altarian pose of deep thought. His blue skin seemed darker than usual under the artificial lights, and his large black eyes reflected the worry that had been growing in his mind for months. He had been the facility commander for 23 years, ever since the Galactic Council had promoted him after the incident on Proxima Station. That promotion had felt like an honor then, but now it felt more like a punishment. The facility contained many secrets, but none more dangerous than what lay behind the massive titanium doors of Vault 7. Zethkara stopped before those doors now, placing his primary hand on the biometric scanner. The red light turned green, and the massive doors began to slide apart with a soft hiss of escaping cold air. Beyond the doors lay a chamber so vast that the far walls disappeared into darkness. Thousands of cylindrical pods filled the chamber in perfect rows, each one glowing with a soft blue light from its internal systems. Each pod contained a single human being, frozen in cryogenic sleep for decades. These were not ordinary humans, though. The Galactic Council had been very specific about which humans to collect over the past 3 centuries. Only the most dangerous ones. The ones who had proven themselves in the worst conflicts that Earth had ever seen. Dr. Ylan Voss looked up from her monitoring station as Zethkara entered. She was a vegan, tall and thin with pale green skin and large silver eyes that could see into spectrums that most species could not. Her people were known throughout the galaxy for their scientific minds and their ability to understand complex biological systems. That was why the Council had assigned her to study the sleeping humans. "Commander," she said in her soft voice, "I have been reviewing the latest brain scans from the specimens. The patterns are becoming more unusual." Zethkara moved to her station and looked at the holographic displays showing brain activity from various pods. The readings showed waves and spikes that should not exist in beings under deep cryogenic suspension. "What do you think it means?" he asked. Dr. Voss touched a control, and the display zoomed in on one particular pod. Inside, a human male floated in the preservation fluid, his muscular body covered in scars from old battles. According to the records, this was Sergeant Rick Barnes, collected during the Vietnam conflict on Earth. He had been leading a patrol when a Galactic Council stealth ship had created what appeared to be an explosion, allowing them to collect his body before Earth medics could reach him. "I believe they are still thinking," Dr. Voss said quietly. "The human brain seems to remain partially active even under our deepest suspension protocols. They might be dreaming or perhaps planning. I cannot be certain, but the patterns suggest organized thought processes." This was not the first time Dr. Voss had reported such findings. For the past 5 years, she had been documenting increasingly complex brain activity from the sleeping humans. Her reports always went to the Galactic Council, but they always came back with the same message: continue monitoring, but take no action. Zethkara walked deeper into the vault, his footsteps echoing in the vast space. He knew the history of every human in these pods because he had been required to study their files. The Council had not collected these humans randomly. Each one had been selected for specific reasons, taken from Earth's most violent conflicts and most dangerous military units. Pod 1247 contained Captain Lisa Hayes, a human female who had led covert operations behind enemy lines during Earth's Afghanistan conflict. Pod 892 held Master Chief Kate Williams, a naval special operations expert who had single-handedly destroyed an enemy submarine using improvised explosives. Pod 2156 contained Colonel Don Foster, a military officer who had survived 3 separate wars and had been known for developing new combat tactics that other human armies later adopted. The collection process had taken centuries. Galactic Council agents would monitor Earth's conflicts and identify the most effective human warriors. They would then stage accidents or create situations where these humans appeared to die, allowing the agents to collect the bodies and place them in cryogenic suspension before actual death occurred. To Earth's governments and families, these humans were simply missing in action or killed in combat. The vault contained representatives from every major human conflict since the year 1940 by Earth's calendar. World War II veterans, Korean War soldiers, Vietnam fighters, Gulf War operators, Afghanistan and Iraq combat specialists, and dozens of smaller conflicts that most galactic species had never heard of. Each human had been chosen because they represented something that terrified the Galactic Council. The human capacity for organized violence. Dr. Voss had joined Zethkara at one of the central monitoring stations. Commander, I must ask again about my recommendations. These brain patterns suggest that the humans might be more aware than we assumed. Perhaps we should consider adjusting the suspension protocols. Zethkara's four eyes blinked slowly. He had forwarded Dr. Voss's recommendations to the Council 17 times over the past year. The response was always the same: maintain current protocols and continue observation. The Council clearly did not want to take any risk with the sleeping humans. The Council has made their position clear, Zethkara said. These humans are to remain in suspension until such time as they are needed. The protocols will not change. The truth was more complex than Dr. Voss knew. The vault existed because of an ancient galactic law written after the war against the Zikri Empire 3,000 years ago. That law stated that when a species proved capable of adaptive warfare beyond normal parameters, they should not be completely destroyed. Instead, samples should be preserved in case their unique capabilities were ever needed against existential threats. Humans had proven themselves worthy of this treatment during their brief contact with Galactic Council forces in the 23rd century. A single human ship had somehow managed to defeat 3 Council vessels using tactics that no computer could predict or counter. The humans had fought with a combination of intelligence, desperation, and willingness to sacrifice themselves that had shocked the Council's military leaders. After that incident, the Council had made a decision. Rather than risk open conflict with Earth, they would secretly collect examples of humanity's finest warriors and keep them in reserve. Earth would be allowed to develop naturally, but the galaxy would maintain access to human military capabilities. Should they ever be required, the facility had been constructed in complete secrecy, using automated systems and robotic labor to avoid any possibility of information leaks. The moon itself had been chosen because its position behind the gas giant made it invisible to Earth's growing space observation capabilities. Only a select few members of the Galactic Council even knew the vault existed. Zethkara looked up at the vast ceiling of the chamber, where thousands more pods hung in suspension. 50,000 humans lay sleeping in this facility, representing the most dangerous military minds that Earth had ever produced. The thought both impressed and terrified him. These beings had been collected precisely because they were too dangerous to leave active in the galaxy, yet here they were, preserved against some future need. Dr. Voss returned to her monitoring station, but Zethkara remained standing among the pods. He often came here when he needed to think about the responsibility that had been placed on his shoulders. Somewhere in the galaxy, billions of beings lived their lives in peace, protected by various military forces and defensive systems. None of them knew that their ultimate protection might rest with the sleeping humans in this hidden vault. The commander touched the surface of the nearest pod, feeling the cold metal against his palm. Inside, another human warrior dreamed whatever dreams came to such beings. According to the records, this one had been a demolitions expert who had destroyed an entire enemy base using nothing but improvised explosives and determination. What kind of dreams did such a being have? What kind of thoughts filled a mind capable of such focused destruction? As Zethkara walked back toward the vault entrance, he noticed Dr. Voss watching him with her large silver eyes. She had been studying the humans for over a decade, and he could see the curiosity burning in her expression. She wanted to wake one of them, to study them properly, to understand what made them so different from other species, but the Council's orders were absolute. The humans would remain asleep until the galaxy faced a threat that conventional forces could not handle. Until that day came, if it ever did, Vault 7 would remain sealed and its contents would remain secret. The galaxy's most dangerous weapons would continue to dream in their metal cocoons, waiting for the day when their particular talents might be needed once again. The first signal came at 1427 Galactic Standard Time on a Tuesday that started like any other day across the known galaxy. Communications Officer Veltar was monitoring routine traffic from the outer rim colonies when his console suddenly erupted with incoming transmissions. The young Centauri officer had been working the night shift for 3 years and had never seen anything like the flood of emergency signals that began pouring in from deep space. "Sir," Veltar called to his supervisor, his voice tight with confusion. "I'm receiving multiple distress calls from the Kepler sector. They're coming in faster than I can process them." Admiral Tekelin of the Centauri Defense Fleet rushed to the communications station. His tall gray form moved with the quick grace that his species was known for, but his usually calm demeanor showed cracks of concern. He had been commanding ships in this sector for 40 years and had never seen such a coordinated flood of emergency transmissions. The first clear message came from Mining Station Omega-7 on the edge of Centauri space. The transmission was broken and filled with static, but the words that came through made Admiral Tekelin's blood run cold. "They're here!" the station commander gasped over the com. "The Devourers have returned. We're seeing ships that match the old descriptions. They're massive and they're heading straight for the colony worlds." Admiral Tekelin felt his heart skip a beat. The Devourers were supposed to be extinct, destroyed in the Great War that had ended over 3,000 years ago. Every child in the galaxy learned about them in school, about the machine intelligence that had consumed entire star systems before finally being defeated at terrible cost. The war had nearly destroyed galactic civilization, and the victory had only come after billions of lives were lost. More signals poured in over the next hour. Colony after colony reported the same thing. Massive dark ships appearing without warning. Ships that looked like the ancient descriptions of devourer vessels. The reports described craft that seemed to absorb light itself, creating patches of absolute darkness against the stars where they moved through space. On Earth, Captain Jake Morrison sat in the classified listening post hidden beneath Cheyenne Mountain. The facility was officially listed as a geological research station, but its real purpose was to monitor alien communications that Earth's governments were not supposed to know about. Morrison had been running these intercepts for 5 years, ever since humanity had developed the technology to decode basic galactic communication protocols. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez worked the signal analysis station next to Morrison, her fingers dancing across holographic controls as she tried to make sense of the flood of alien chatter that was suddenly filling the airwaves. She had learned to read basic galactic standard during her training, but the volume of traffic was overwhelming her translation systems. "Captain," Rodriguez said, looking up from her displays, "something big is happening out there. I'm seeing panic signals from at least 30 different star systems. They keep mentioning something called Devourers and references to old weapons and sleeping ones." Morrison moved to her station and watched the translation algorithms struggle to keep up with the incoming data. Earth's governments had suspected for decades that they were being kept out of some larger galactic community, but the evidence had always been limited. Now they were seeing clear proof that major events were happening in space around them. Events that their supposed alien allies were keeping secret. The signals from the outer rim colonies grew more desperate as the hours passed. Mining Station Omega-7 went silent first, its final transmission cutting off mid-sentence as the station commander screamed about something approaching through the darkness. Colony Epsilon 12 lasted longer, sending detailed reports about the attacking ships before their communications were suddenly terminated. Dr. Sarah Kim worked frantically at the Galactic Council's main communication center on Centauri Prime, trying to coordinate responses to the crisis. She was a human diplomat who had been assigned to the Council as part of Earth's limited participation in galactic affairs, but her security clearance only allowed her access to basic information. Now she found herself watching her alien colleagues panic about threats she was not authorized to know about. Counselor Hishara, Dr. Kim approached the tall vegan representative. Earth stands ready to assist with whatever crisis you're facing. Our military forces may be limited, but we want to help. The vegan's silver eyes looked at Dr. Kim with something that might have been pity. This is not a matter for your people, Dr. Kim. The threat we face is beyond anything Earth has encountered. Please return to your quarters while the Council addresses this situation. The dismissal stung, but Dr. Kim had learned to expect such treatment. Earth was considered a junior member of the galactic community, barely advanced enough to warrant inclusion in the Council's lowest-level discussions. She had spent 3 years trying to prove that humanity deserved a larger role in galactic affairs, but events like this reminded her how little trust the aliens placed in human capabilities. Back on the front lines, Admiral Tekelin was receiving reports that defied everything he thought he knew about warfare. The attacking ships seemed to adapt to every weapon fired at them, learning from each encounter and becoming more effective with each battle. His fleet had engaged the first wave of Devour vessels near the Proxima system, and the results had been devastating. Admiral, his tactical officer reported with a trembling voice, the enemy vessels are analyzing our weapons in real time. Every shot we fire, they adapt their defenses. Our plasma cannons worked for the first few minutes, then became completely ineffective. The missile systems lasted longer, but now they're useless too. Admiral Tekelin watched his tactical display as another of his ships disappeared from the sensors. The Devourers weren't just destroying the vessels, they were completely consuming them, breaking them down into raw materials that were somehow being incorporated into their own ships. It was exactly like the old stories, but seeing it happen in real time was more terrifying than any historical account. The Devourer ships moved through space with purpose and intelligence that exceeded anything the current galactic military had prepared for. They didn't fight like the pirates or territorial disputes that the defense fleet normally handled. Instead, they moved with perfect coordination, as if every ship was controlled by a single mind that could process millions of variables simultaneously. Communications. Officer Veltar continued monitoring the emergency channels as more colonies fell silent. The pattern was always the same. First contact, brief resistance, then nothing. Entire worlds with millions of inhabitants were disappearing from the galactic communication network as if they had never existed. Sir, Veltar reported to Admiral Tekelin, I'm now counting 47 systems that have gone dark. The advance is systematic and appears to be accelerating. Based on their current trajectory, they'll reach the mid-rim worlds within 6 months. The Admiral felt a cold certainty settle in his stomach. The mid-rim contained some of the galaxy's most important industrial and population centers. If the Devourers reached those systems with their current momentum, billions more lives would be lost and the galaxy's ability to mount any meaningful resistance would collapse. Emergency sessions were called on every major world as the scope of the threat became clear. Military commanders who had spent their careers preparing for conventional conflicts found themselves facing an enemy that seemed to learn from every tactic they employed. The Devourers adapted faster than new strategies could be developed, turning the galaxy's own technological advantages against them. On Earth, Captain Morrison and Lieutenant Rodriguez worked around the clock to decode more of the alien communications. The fragments they could translate painted a picture of galaxy-wide panic and military forces that were being systematically destroyed. References to ancient weapons and sleeping guardians appeared repeatedly in the transmissions, but the context remained unclear. Rodriguez, Morrison said during their 18th hour of continuous monitoring, compile everything we have about these sleeping ones they keep mentioning. Something tells me this information might be important for Earth's security. As Rodriguez began organizing the intercepted data, neither of them realized that they were documenting the galaxy's growing desperation to access weapons that had been hidden away for centuries. The aliens who had dismissed Earth as a junior partner were now facing the possibility that their salvation might rest with the very species they had kept in the dark about galactic affairs. The screams that echoed across subspace from dying worlds grew louder each day, carried by communication systems that the Devourers seemed unable or unwilling to destroy immediately. Perhaps they wanted the galaxy to hear the death cries of their victims. Perhaps they fed on the fear that those screams created in the survivors. Whatever the reason, the sound of civilizations dying began to drive some species to madness. Adding psychological warfare to the Devourers' already overwhelming advantages, Admiral Tekelin stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the tactical display show the advancing darkness that represented the Devourer fleet. His forces had bought time with their sacrifice, but it was clear that conventional resistance was futile. Somewhere in the galaxy, the emergency session of the Galactic Council convened in the Great Chamber on Centauri Prime, its curved walls echoing with the urgent voices of representatives from hundreds of worlds. High Chancellor Mordock stood at the central podium, his ancient form moving slowly as he activated the holographic displays that showed the galaxy's current situation. The news was worse than anyone had dared to imagine. Distinguished members, Chancellor Mordock's voice carried clearly through the chamber's translation systems. We face the greatest threat our civilization has encountered in 3 millennia. The Devourer advance has now consumed 847 worlds. 12 billion sentient beings have been confirmed dead, and their fleet continues to move toward the core systems with increasing speed. The holographic display showed a 3-dimensional map of the galaxy with dark patches marking the areas where Devourer forces had struck. The pattern of destruction formed a growing stain that seemed to pulse with malevolent life as it expanded toward the populated heart of galactic civilization. Counselor Fenwick of the Andromedan Collective raised his crystalline hand to speak. Chancellor, our combined fleets have thrown everything at these machines. Plasma weapons, kinetic bombardments, quantum disruptors, even experimental gravitational weapons. Nothing works for more than a few engagements before they adapt. How do we fight an enemy that learns from every attack? The question hung in the air like a curse. Every military commander in the galaxy had been asking the same thing as their forces were systematically destroyed. The Devourers seemed to possess unlimited adaptability, turning each battle into a learning experience that made them stronger while their opponents grew weaker. Dr. Ylan Voss sat in the scientific advisory section, her silver eyes focused on data streams that painted an increasingly hopeless picture. She had been called from her research station to provide expertise on biological warfare applications, but even the most advanced viral weapons had proven useless against mechanical intelligences that could adapt their defense systems faster than organic weapons could evolve. The mathematical projections are clear, announced Professor Kellyan from the Vegan Science Institute. At their current rate of advance and adaptation, the Devourers will reach Centauri Prime within 14 months. Our defensive capabilities decrease with each engagement while their effectiveness increases exponentially. We are facing a war that becomes more unwinnable with each day that passes. Chancellor Mordock nodded grimly at the assessment. He had lived through 400 years of galactic politics and had never seen the Council so united in desperation. Representatives who normally spent their time arguing about trade routes and territorial disputes now sat in stunned silence as they contemplated the extinction of their civilization. Counselor Heshara of the Vegan Empire stood slowly, her tall form commanding attention as she prepared to speak. The chamber fell silent because everyone knew that the vegans possessed some of the galaxy's most advanced military research programs. If anyone had a solution, it would likely come from their scientists. There is one option we have not discussed, Heshara said, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber. An option that was established by the ancient protocols after the First Devourer War. We must consider releasing the humans from Vault 7. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Representatives leaped to their feet, voices raised in shock and horror. The mention of Vault 7 sent ripples of fear through the chamber because most council members had hoped never to hear those words spoken aloud. The vault was the galaxy's most closely guarded secret, known only to the highest levels of government and military command. "You cannot be serious," shouted Counselor Zektar from the Rigel systems. Those creatures were locked away precisely because they were too dangerous for civilized space. Their methods of warfare violate every convention we have established over the past 1,000 years. Heshara remained standing calmly as the chamber erupted around her. She had expected this reaction, but she also knew that desperate times called for desperate measures. The humans in Vault 7 represented capabilities that no other species in the galaxy possessed, capabilities that had terrified the Council into hiding them away rather than risk having them active in civilized space. "Chancellor," Morda called for order, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Counselor Heshara has raised a legitimate option under the ancient protocols. Dr. Voss, you have studied the vault specimens extensively. Please share your analysis with the Council." Dr. Voss approached the central podium with data tablets containing years of research on the sleeping humans. She had known this day might come, ever since she first began documenting the unusual brain activity patterns in the vault specimens. Now she found herself in the position of having to explain why humanity's capacity for violence might be the galaxy's salvation. "Honored counselors," Dr. Voss began, "my research indicates that human military doctrine differs fundamentally from all other known species. Where we fight to achieve victory through superior technology or strategy, humans fight to ensure that their enemies lose everything. They do not simply seek to win battles, they seek to make continued resistance impossible for their opponents." She activated a holographic display showing psychological profiles from the vault specimens. "The humans we collected represent individuals who thrived in the most chaotic and unpredictable combat situations their species has ever produced. They excel in environments where traditional military doctrine fails, where success requires improvisation and willingness to accept tremendous risks." Counselor Brickstyle of the Capellan Union leaned forward in his seat. "You speak of their psychological profiles, but what makes you believe they could succeed where our combined forces have failed?" Dr. Voss changed the display to show tactical analyses from various human conflicts. "Human warfare is characterized by unpredictability combined with ruthless pragmatism. They do not follow established patterns that can be easily analyzed and countered. Instead, they adapt their methods constantly, often in ways that seem illogical to our strategic computers but prove devastatingly effective in practice." Commander Zethkara had been called from the vault to provide operational insights about the sleeping humans. He stood reluctantly when Chancellor Mordok called upon him, clearly uncomfortable with discussing the vault's contents in such a public forum. "The specimens represent the most dangerous military minds Earth has ever produced," Zethkara reported. "Among them is Sergeant Rick Barnes, who held off an entire enemy battalion using improvised tactics and weapons. Captain Lisa Hayes lead covert operations behind enemy lines for months without support. Master Chief Kate Williams destroyed an enemy submarine using only explosive charges and determination." He paused, looking around the chamber at the assembled representatives. "These are not soldiers in the conventional sense. They are individuals who view warfare as a problem to be solved rather than a ritual to be performed. They fight without regard for established conventions or accepted limitations." The debate continued for hours as representatives struggled with the implications of releasing the humans. Some argued that it would be better to face extinction than to unleash such dangerous beings into the galaxy. Others countered that the vault had been created specifically for situations like this. When conventional forces proved inadequate against existential threats, Dr. Voss provided additional evidence from her research, including recordings of human battle communications that demonstrated their approach to warfare. The recordings showed humans coordinating attacks while under heavy fire, adapting their tactics in real time and continuing to fight even when facing impossible odds. "They do not fight because they hate what is in front of them," Dr. Voss explained. They fight because they love what is behind them. This psychological motivation makes them willing to accept costs that other species would consider unacceptable. As the debate wore on, reports continued to arrive from the front lines. 3 more worlds had fallen silent during the council session, and Admiral Teklen's remaining forces were conducting fighting retreats toward the mid-rim systems. Time was running out for any solution to be implemented, Chancellor. Mordic finally called for a formal vote on the proposal to activate Vault 7. The chamber fell silent as representatives considered the choice between certain extinction and uncertain salvation. The humans offered hope, but they also represented unknown dangers that could potentially prove worse than the Devourers themselves. The voting process took place in complete silence, each representative entering their decision into secure terminals that would tabulate the results without revealing individual positions. The stakes were too high for public debate, and the decision would affect every living being in the galaxy. When the results appeared on the central display, the margin was smaller than anyone had expected. 500,001 votes. In favor of releasing the humans, 500,000 votes against. A single vote had decided the fate of both humanity and galactic civilization. Chancellor Mordak looked around the chamber at the faces of representatives who had just made the most difficult decision in galactic history. The motion passes. Vault 7 will be activated under Emergency Protocol 7, may whatever gods we believe in have. The awakening protocols began with Lieutenant Colonel Steve Parker, former Delta Force operator who had vanished during a classified mission in Iraq 43 years earlier. Dr. Yelan Voss monitored his vital signs as the cryogenic systems slowly warmed his body back to life, watching as brain activity increased and cellular functions restarted after decades of suspension. Parker's ice-blue eyes opened suddenly, startling Dr. Voss despite her years of experience with revival procedures. Most beings required hours to regain consciousness after long-term suspension, but the human was alert within minutes. His eyes moved quickly around the medical bay, taking in details and assessing his situation with the calm efficiency of a trained soldier. How long? Parker's voice was rough from the suspension, but his question was direct and focused. When Dr. Voss told him it had been 43 years, he simply nodded and asked for a briefing. There was no panic, no emotional breakdown, just professional acceptance of new mission parameters. Commander Zethkara watched the awakening process with growing unease. He had expected the humans to be traumatized by their situation, confused by the passage of time, or at least curious about their circumstances. Instead, Parker treated the entire experience as if it were just another military operation requiring his attention. "Where are my men?" Parker asked as he sat up on the medical table, his movements careful but confident. "What's the tactical situation? Who's in command of this operation?" The questions came rapid fire, each one focused on operational details rather than personal concerns. Dr. Voss found herself struggling to explain the galactic situation to someone whose first priority was understanding the military context of his awakening. Over the next 12 hours, the revival process continued with carefully selected individuals. Sergeant Major Tony Martinez emerged from suspension with the same professional calm, immediately asking about weapon availability and enemy capabilities. Master Chief Kate Williams woke up and requested a briefing on current technology levels and available resources. Each awakening followed the same pattern. The humans adapted to their situation with remarkable speed, treating their circumstances as mission parameters rather than personal tragedies. They showed little interest in what they had lost during their long sleep, instead focusing entirely on why they had been awakened and what they were expected to accomplish. Captain Su Chun, a former military intelligence officer, was among the first to grasp the full scope of the galactic situation. After receiving her briefing about the Devourer threat, she spent several minutes analyzing the tactical data before making her first request. "I need to speak with whoever is in charge of your military forces," Chun said to Commander Zethkara. "Your current strategy is fundamentally flawed. You're fighting these machines like they're just another enemy fleet, but they're an adaptive intelligence. You need to change your entire approach. The aliens found the human responses disturbing, on a level they had not anticipated. Most species would require weeks or months to adjust to such dramatic changes in their circumstances. The humans seemed to view their 40-year suspension as simply another factor to incorporate into their tactical planning. Colonel Dan Foster, a former Marine Corps officer who had served in 3 separate wars, actually thanked the aliens for his long rest. "Best sleep I've had in years," he told Dr. Voss with a slight smile. "Now, what do you need us to kill?" The casual way Foster discussed violence made several alien technicians visibly uncomfortable. These beings were trained scientists and medical professionals who had spent their careers preserving life. The human ability to transition instantly from sleep to combat planning represented a mindset that they found alien and frightening. Major Carl Thompson, a former Force Recon officer, emerged from his pod and immediately began doing physical exercises to assess his body's condition after suspension. Within an hour of awakening, he was requesting access to weapons and asking about enemy force compositions. His adaptation to the situation was so rapid that Dr. Voss began to wonder if the humans had somehow been aware during their suspension. "Thompson?" she asked during his medical evaluation. "Do you remember anything from your time in suspension? Any dreams or awareness of the passage of time?" Thompson paused in his exercises and looked at her with thoughtful eyes. "I remember planning," he sighed quietly, thinking about tactics and strategies for situations I'd never encountered. It's like my mind kept working even while my body was frozen. This revelation sent chills through the alien medical staff. The idea that the humans had been mentally active during suspension suggested levels of consciousness that their technology was not designed to maintain. It also meant that the humans had potentially been preparing for unknown conflicts for decades. The awakening process accelerated as more humans were brought back to life. Each one displayed the same pattern of rapid adaptation and immediate focus on tactical considerations. They formed informal command structures automatically, with senior officers taking charge and junior personnel falling into support roles without any formal orders being given. General Frank Miller was the last to be awakened as protocol demanded. That the highest-ranking officer be revived only after the situation was fully prepared. Miller had been a 4-star general who disappeared during a classified operation in Afghanistan, and his leadership experience exceeded that of most galactic military commanders. When Miller's eyes opened, the first thing he did was look around the medical bay and count the number of his people who were present. He then asked for a complete briefing on the tactical situation, including detailed information about enemy capabilities, friendly force strengths, and available resources. Commander Zethkara provided the briefing personally, expecting gratitude for the humans' release or perhaps negotiation about terms of service. Instead, General Miller listened to the entire presentation in silence, occasionally asking specific questions about Devourer technology or galactic military doctrine. "Show us everything you know about them," Miller said when the briefing concluded. "Every piece of data, every tactical analysis, every failed engagement. Then give us your fastest ships and stay out of our way?" The directness of the demand shocked the alien command staff. They had expected the humans to be grateful for their release, perhaps willing to serve as auxiliary forces under galactic command. Instead, Miller was effectively demanding complete operational control and access to classified military resources. "General," Zethkara said carefully, "the Galactic Council will need assurances that human forces will operate within established military conventions. There are protocols and laws governing warfare that must be respected." Miller's expression remained neutral, but several other humans in the briefing room exchanged glances. Captain Chun leaned forward slightly and spoke in a voice that carried clear authority despite her lower rank. "Commander, you woke us up because your protocols aren't working. You're losing this war because you're fighting it like civilized beings against an enemy that doesn't care about your conventions. If you want our help, you need to understand that we don't fight fair and we don't fight clean. We fight to win." The statement hung in the air like a challenge. The aliens had spent centuries developing military doctrines, based on minimizing casualties and respecting the rights of enemy combatants. The humans were openly stating that they would ignore such considerations in favor of effectiveness. Dr. Voss found herself studying the human group dynamics as they organized themselves. Despite being from different time periods and military branches, they seemed to understand each other with minimal communication. Their shared experiences of combat and violence created bonds that transcended normal social barriers. Major Thompson approached one of the alien technicians and asked about manufacturing capabilities. "Can you produce weapons to our specifications? We're going to need equipment that doesn't exist in your current inventory." When the technician asked what kind of weapons, Thompson smiled in a way that made the alien step backward. "The kind that your civilized military doctrine doesn't allow. We're going to teach these machines what real warfare looks like." The humans spent their first day of awakening in continuous briefings and planning sessions. They absorbed information about galactic technology with frightening speed, immediately identifying weaknesses in current military doctrine and proposing alternatives that made their alien observers deeply uncomfortable. Sergeant Martinez suggested using civilian ships as improvised weapons platforms, arguing that the Devourers would not expect attacks from non-military vessels. Master Chief Williams proposed biological warfare techniques that could corrupt machine intelligences through organic contamination. Each suggestion violated established galactic military conventions. "You need to understand something, General," Miller told the assembled alien command staff during the final briefing of the day. "We're not here to win your war the way you want it won. We're here to end the threat completely, using whatever methods prove necessary. If you can't accept that, then put us back in the freezers and find another solution." The ultimatum forced Commander Zethkara to make immediate decisions about resource allocation and operational authority. The Council had voted to release the humans, but they had not specified the terms. The first human operation against the Devourers began 3 weeks after the awakening, and it violated every principle of galactic military doctrine. Captain Tony Martinez led a team of 12 humans aboard a modified cargo ship called the Silent Runner, deliberately allowing their vessel to be captured by a Devourer scout fleet near the Vega system. Admiral Tekelin watched the operation unfold from his command ship, his 4 hands clenched in horror as the human vessel made no attempt to evade the approaching Devourer ships. Every instinct he had developed over 40 years of military service screamed that this was suicide, but General Miller had insisted that conventional thinking was exactly why the galaxy was losing this war. "They're being taken aboard the lead Devourer vessel," reported the tactical officer, his voice tight with disbelief. "The humans are allowing themselves to be captured without resistance." What happened next defied every prediction made by galactic military computers. Instead of being processed like previous captives, the humans began moving through the Devourer ship with purpose and coordination. They had somehow smuggled explosive devices and improvised weapons past the machine intelligence's scanning systems, hidden in places that no logical analysis would have predicted. Martinez and his team didn't try to escape or signal for rescue. Instead, they systematically sabotaged critical systems throughout the massive ship, using techniques that combined demolition expertise with brutal close-quarters combat. When Devourer maintenance units tried to stop them, the humans fought with a savagery that the machines were not programmed to counter. "The lead Devourer ship is showing massive internal explosions," the tactical officer reported in amazement. "Power levels are dropping across all systems. How are they doing this from inside?" The answer came 12 hours later when the entire Devourer vessel suddenly lost structural integrity and collapsed in on itself. The humans had somehow turned the ship's own recycling systems against its hull, creating a cascade failure that consumed the vessel from within. Martinez and his team died in the explosion, but they had proven that the supposedly invincible Devourers could be defeated through methods that galactic forces had never considered. Colonel Dan Foster implemented the next phase of human strategy, something he called aggressive infection. His teams deliberately exposed themselves to Devourer nanites, the microscopic machines that the enemy used to break down captured materials. But instead of being consumed, the humans had modified Earth viruses to corrupt the nanite's programming. Dr. Ylan Voss monitored the biological warfare experiments with growing alarm. The humans were using their own bodies as delivery systems for organic weapons that could contaminate machine intelligences. It was a level of self-sacrifice that no other species would consider, turning their own biology into a weapon against an enemy that relied on predictable organic responses. The nanites are designed to process organic matter according to established patterns, Foster explained to the horrified alien scientists. They can't adapt fast enough when we introduce biological chaos directly into their systems. Our modified viruses replicate faster than their error correction protocols can compensate. The results were devastating for the Devourer forces. Ships that successfully captured human teams found their own systems corrupted by organic contamination that spread through their networks like a disease. The machine intelligence that controlled the fleet had never encountered biological warfare. Combined with information warfare, and their adaptive algorithms struggled to process threats that operated on multiple levels simultaneously. Major Kate Williams led the most disturbing operations from the alien perspective. Her teams didn't try to destroy Devourer ships, but instead captured them, reverse engineering their technology in real time while the battles were still ongoing. The humans would board enemy vessels, kill or disable the crew systems, then immediately begin modifying the ship's weapons to use against other Devourer forces. They're turning our enemy's own technology against them faster than we can track, Admiral Tekelin reported to the Galactic Council. The humans are capturing Devourer vessels and having them operational under human control within hours. Their technical adaptation speed exceeds anything we've seen from any species. The Devourers found themselves facing an enemy that not only refused to follow established combat patterns, but actively sought to turn every engagement into an opportunity for technological theft and reverse engineering. The humans treated captured enemy equipment like puzzle pieces, rapidly understanding alien technology and improving upon it in ways that violated every principle of engineering safety. Williams personally led a boarding action that captured a Devourer command ship, then spent 6 hours reprogramming its weapon systems to fire on other machine vessels. When the Devourer fleet tried to adapt to this new threat, they found that the humans were already 3 steps ahead. Having anticipated the adaptation and prepared countermeasures, the psychological warfare component of human strategy proved equally effective and equally disturbing to galactic observers. Sergeant Rick Barnes led teams that broadcast recordings of human battle cries and war songs across Devourer communication frequencies, somehow interfering with their coordination protocols. The machine intelligence appears to be vulnerable to certain acoustic patterns, Barnes explained to Dr. Voss. We're not just making noise, we're introducing chaos into their communication systems. Every species has music, but human war songs carry emotional frequencies that machine logic can't process effectively. The sounds of human warriors singing old battle hymns while engaging in combat created interference patterns that disrupted Devourer fleet coordination. The machines could adapt to energy weapons and kinetic attacks, but they struggled to counter the psychological impact of beings who fought while celebrating their own potential deaths. General Miller coordinated the overall human strategy from a captured Devourer vessel that his forces had converted into a mobile command platform. The ship still looked like enemy technology from the outside, but its interior had been completely redesigned according to human military preferences. The aliens who visited the command ship found it both impressive and terrifying. We're not fighting to win individual battles, Miller explained to a delegation of galactic military leaders. We're fighting to make continued resistance impossible for the enemy. Every engagement teaches us more about their capabilities while demonstrating that their adaptive advantages can be turned against them. The human approach to warfare combined technological theft, biological contamination, psychological manipulation, and suicidal tactics into a comprehensive strategy that the Devourers could not counter effectively. Each time the machine intelligence adapted to one human method, the humans introduced 3 new approaches that exploited different vulnerabilities. Captain Su Chun led intelligence operations that infiltrated Devour communication networks, planting false information and corrupted data that caused machine forces to attack each other. Her teams used captured enemy technology to send contradictory orders throughout the Devourer fleet, creating confusion and friendly fire incidents that decimated their coordination. The machines rely on perfect information flow, Chun reported. When we introduce false data into their networks, their entire decision-making process becomes compromised. They can't distinguish between real orders and our fabricated commands fast enough to maintain effective operations. A combination of all human tactics created a cascade effect that gradually overwhelmed the Devourer fleet's ability to function. Ships that had seemed invincible weeks earlier now fell victim to attacks that combined multiple approaches simultaneously. The machines found themselves fighting an enemy that operated according to no consistent pattern, making adaptation impossible. Within 6 months of human deployment, the Devourer advance had not only stopped, but had begun retreating toward the galactic rim. The machine intelligence that had seemed unstoppable was now struggling to maintain control over its own forces. As human tactics spread corruption and chaos throughout their fleet, the final battle occurred when General Miller personally led a combined human force against the Devourer flagship, a massive vessel that served as the central processing unit for the entire machine intelligence. Miller himself boarded the ship, armed with nothing but a combat knife and explosive charges, fighting his way to the ship's core systems. "This is for every world you destroyed," Miller transmitted as he planted the final charges. The explosion that followed didn't just destroy the flagship, but sent a feedback pulse through the Devourer network that crashed their collective intelligence permanently. Admiral Tekelin watched from his command ship as the remaining Devourer vessels suddenly went dark, their coordination systems failing as their central intelligence died. The humans had not just defeated the enemy fleet, but had eliminated the machine consciousness that controlled it, ensuring that the threat could never return. The galaxy was saved, but forever changed by what they had witnessed. The humans had demonstrated that civilized warfare was a luxury that could not be afforded against truly existential threats. Their methods had been brutal, chaotic, and effective, in ways that traditional military doctrine could never match. When the fighting ended, the humans,